Thank you all so much for coming. So I'm Katya. Hi. So first of all, I would like to say that I feel that art making and what artists do is kind of being a kitchen processor, and so what kind of practice is resulting is depends on what is loaded in this processor and what kind of processor they are. So this is my excuse to talk a lot. Each time I have an artist talk, I talk quite a lot about myself because I think that's explanation of what kind of processor I am. It's sort of important. So overall, I'm predominantly a painter. I am from St. Petersburg, Russia. My first degree is in psychology. I lived in quite a few different countries and studied and worked mostly in the UK. And now I moved here to Leipzig and live here. So my practice were super different, and I started maybe 15 years ago and so on. I did really works in all possible mediums. I did a lot of performance and installation and porcelain sculptures and video and literally everything available. But I always felt I'm somehow dragged to painting, and for a while it was very hard for me to settle in painting. Also because it was time when painting was very questionable thing to do. You always had to explain why you're doing it and so on, and very kind of sometimes aggressive manner asked questions. And so because I felt there is this something really strange which always brings me back to painting, even if I'm probably better in performance. I went to Royal College in Britain. It was quite an important thing for me, where I probably developed my painting practice. But initially, instead of immediately developing to be a great painter, I immediately developed a huge complex of being a foreign weirdo. And I think to some extent it's a typical immigration experience, because when you immigrate and you speak with accent, the second question people are going to ask you is where you're from. And then depending on where you are, you're going to get a particular pack of stereotypes about your country addressed on you. And so with a kind of Cold War things happening in England, saying you're from Russia was never particularly comfortable, even before the war. And I felt that it's this identity was sort of something standing before me, being artist, woman, feminist, or whatever. And then another thing, it was very hard for me to fit culturally in a British social sort of socialization patterns. And so being a psychologist, I obviously started questioning why all that happening and what's wrong with me, what kind of experiences sort of formed me, and what actually does it mean to be from Russia and all that. And I first started thinking a lot about my family, in the midst of those reflections, I actually first got acquainted with my family archive, because somehow no one ever showed it to me before. And then it just happened that my grandma showed me her side, and then I got curious about all other family archives. And my it was a huge mess, this archive, to be honest. And in a way it's nothing special. I think everyone has those family photographs of people having fun or working or having parties. But if you think of it, what is it actually, right? It's a window in the past with people who do something before your existence. And it's a time machine in times where you're not there, but something is happening and something is documented. There's people but not really in this age. And I felt I want to somehow interact with them, but how you can interact with photographs without destroying them? There's not that much you can do for real. And so first thing I did, I printed them on canvases, digitally printed, and painted them over. And I seen that I'm sort of touching this past with paint, leaving my present there. And somehow I really found that there was some kind of unprecedented playfulness and presence and agency in my work then, which I didn't had before. And I felt it's really kind of dialogue that I'm even this little pig or something. It's just kind of this playful thing. Oh, I'm just gonna put it there, not thinking for 5 hours what's gonna be my next step. So I thought of painting as this tool to interact with photograph. And I was wondering again what's this obsession, so why I have such a particular relationship with past, what drags me there, why I don't have it if I just have some kind of picture from internet, I don't have this expressivity, why there is something about past. And then I started digging deeper into where it should come from and what does it mean. And I kind of realized that in a way, since I grew up with all my contemporaries, we never really problematize it. But when I looked on from a foreign perspective or where I'm from and what was going on there, I realized it's a very particular time and a very particular experience, that I was basically born on the ruins of the empire, and not just as a country, but this cultural narrative, the vision of past and future which existed in the Soviet Union sort of failed in one day, and you just grow up like everyone else. You don't think it's something special, but I think for my generation it was very typical that somehow we found ourselves in a world where there was no real past and future, because with future there was not many people really believed in communist idea of future, but still it was somehow present, and there was some kind of direction which completely crashed in the 90s, because it was very, very hectic times. There were people were becoming millionaires in one day or losing everything in one day. It was happening all the time. So it was very unstable, and past somehow was also super unstable, because with past, even in my family, everyone had their own perspective what was there in Soviet Union. It depended who was successful, who not successful, who got in whatever Gulag, who didn't get there. There were many factors which defined what kind of history people are standing with, and somehow everyone had their own history, and it was normal. That's how we lived. We had different history books in school, and that was also normal, that you just live, that there is no stable past, you can believe in whatever you want. And I think this state of some kind of limbo, some kind of non-gravity connection with the past make me feel like I want to reclaim it, I want to settle in it somehow, I want to do something with the situation that past is unapproachable and unstable, and you don't really know what was there. And I think that's my current theory why I become so obsessed about photographs and still stay obsessed about them somehow. So this idea that through painting I can intrude into a photograph and reclaim this moment, bringing all my presence in it, seeing it as a sort of portal which I enter, asked for a bigger format. And this work was maybe my first painting of a big format. And it's based on a photograph. It's based on a photograph of my father and his friends playing chess, which is, I think, really a cute one, because it also has this really strong presence of past, who gonna play chess on the beach right now. And when I was working on it, I tried to look for this, not just that I'm doing whatever I want, but that I'm building some kind of connection with the photograph and also with the painting, which gets out of it. I went to even bigger format eventually, so this work was 2.5 meters wide, and I started exploring more of this open gesture, because if you think of them as a portal, then if you need wider gesture to feel higher, more stronger bodily connection with that. And I think from this work I also started bringing more color, because here some bodies are still relatively realistic, which I moved away from that later completely. So also was a feeling of a space that it became harder and harder for me to keep empty areas in the painting. I wanted to bring my presence everywhere, in every part of it. And this series of, actually they're free paintings, I just don't like the third one. So it's based on my photograph of my granddad operating on a kid. And actually I'm the only offspring of quite known dynasty of surgeons. So the fact that I decided to become a psychologist was already a huge failure in the family. And when I decided to become an artist was complete facepalm. Working, that's actual photograph, by the way. So I actually think it's one of the most beautiful photographs I found out there for this Renaissance kind of quality and perspective. So my granddad died not far from the moment when I was making this painting, and while making it I actually got deeper in this experience of photograph as a documentation of death, as like parts say. That like this person is there in a photograph but they're not here anymore, and so when you paint with them and you bring your present in, it's like this kind of alchemical quality that like you are kind of getting yourself in something which is not here anymore, which is dead. And I think that in this moment, this idea of like painting as a tool of intrusion in the situation, the time, the person you probably want to reconnect with, right? Because it's not possible anymore to reconnect anyhow with person who's now dead, was maybe quite interesting move in my work. And generally using surgical photographs is quite a big thing for me for this like surgical dynasty. But also I think that I was told like by one of the tutors and they say that like my approach has something of a surgery on its own, of like how that I cannot keep any kind of shape. I'm trying to kind of cut everything and bring myself everywhere, and so this approach into shapes, into cutting them and inserting, and also colors. I think my colors dramatically changed now, but then I think they were under a huge influence of surgical photographs which were around me all my childhood, and I never actually thought there is something disturbing in like open stomach, because that was like everywhere, and like what's its intestines, what's so special about it. So like for me, like it was totally normal to have this like anatomical atlases everywhere, and like even like photographs of open stomachs. So I think that influenced my palette quite a lot. That was my gradation work in college, by the way. And I probably want to tell a bit about how like the studio looks like that, because I want those really open gestures. I like to have quite a pack of liquid paint, like the slimish kind of liquid paint, which and like wide brushes. And I think there is something about the slimish nature that like slippery is memory or somewhere, because memory is also sort of like something like always getting away from you, just as like this like half liquid paint. Like my color palette was changing quite a lot since this like I did quite a lot of those like works based on surgeries. And for example, this work, which is also based off my family photograph, from actually one of the oldest family photographs in my archive, that's from something like 1910. So I never really met those people, but somehow I know their stories, and that's like those girls had like pretty hardcore life, because it's like 2 wars, revolution, occupation of the area they were living, that's like Eastern Ukraine, and so they're like so much happening in their life, but they're nowhere in official history, because like official history basically filled by some guys on the horses, and that like, and they're nowhere this like heroism, everyday heroism of all those women. And when I was working to it, I somehow moved towards using color as one more emotional response. So this idea of like the social history in this photograph, how can I respond to that if I just don't take any kind of realistic colors anymore? And then like since then I started maybe moving further to very maybe random-ish color palettes. Slowly I ran out of good photographs in my family archive which I liked, and I started using photographs from flea markets and look for this like history of strangers. And also like flea market photographs are basically thrown away, and there is something in it that's like someone's life which is thrown away, so like which I can kind of keep and do something with it and bring it to life somehow. There are particular things I'm looking for in every photograph, and first of all, it must be something which evoke some kind of emotional reaction in me for this or that reason. And the photograph which was based for this work is a photograph of Navy soldiers, Navy sailors, I guess you say, like really this like chilling dudes sunbathing somewhere in Crimea, and half of my family is from Crimea, and Crimea always was a huge question for my family, because like there were different sides parts of my family took, and people in Crimea were like my grandma was always like, oh no, we want to be Russian. Like my mom was saying, no, that's illegal, and that was a huge thing. And actually, I think Crimea is very problematic place for many reasons. And somehow having this scene of this like, which like on first glance there are just like young men having fun. In a very peaceful way, but at the same time they are sort of they're being trained as a killing machines, if you think of them. And so I think this ambiguity made this painting very complex for me, and actually that's maybe the longest painting, the work which took the longest out of everything I have for this like complexity. And another thing which is quite important for me in those found photographs is that I like when there are a lot of people, and I like when there are not just people but also some other stuff around. And I really like to confront the idea of portrait when it's like like there is like someone's face and a background, and like in a romantic literature, right, there is like some kind of hero and like this like society which doesn't understand him, and everything, all the attention goes to hero. So I try to confront it, because since I deal with the scenes from the past, in a scene of the past, everything gonna be apart from the past, so everything disappeared in the same way. So it doesn't really matter. It's not like someone's face is more important than someone's feet or someone's like shoe or like a tree, because everything is a part of this like past moment. And this is a work which, oh, I think I pressed something wrong, which exploits exactly the same thing of this like presence, like this random spread of what's important, what's not important in a painting. And also I was like, this is actually pretty new. In this one I returned to this like search of this suffocating presence of myself in every part of the painting, so that there are nowhere to almost, well, maybe on her legs there is a little bit of space, but generally there are nowhere to chill. And this like that's like with this desire to put myself in the past, I can get like kind of completely wild, putting myself everywhere and like not being happy with anywhere where like it's kind of free. Yeah, so and like not all my paintings actually super huge, like this is like 90 to 90 centimeters, and this painting also had a interesting story that I, indeed 2 different years in the same flea market, I found 2 photographs of exactly the same girl. It's like pretty sure like exactly the same, and like also surroundings were kind of similar, and I thought she's a kind of ghost following me. It was really strange, right, that like it's some girl from the past I found in different places. And I think like this was actually a super happy photograph which was the base of this one, but it got really gothic because I think I thought of like this girl being my kind of ghost. This work was special because in this one I normally use a projector to transfer the photograph. In this one I didn't, and that's why everyone is so unproportional. And I think it got like more kind of spooky vibes, this like unproportional thing, that there's just such a random sizes of things, and maybe kind of more eclectic and more expressive. Actually now return to this work, and I think I'm gonna continue like this year trying to work without projector to get this more like spontaneity. I have some works on paper which need to cover up. I have some works on paper which kind of use a very confrontational materials. There are watercolor and oil pastels, and there's like oil pastels very like fat and kind of disgusting, and watercolor is like so floating, and I really like how they worked or not work, how they deal together. And so like it's basically the same concept when I work on paper. It's still like found photographs, but somehow it gets a little different aesthetic. And this work I done when I was here in Leipzig in residence in Pilotenküche. And again, in this one, I think when I came to Leipzig, something happened with my palette. I got really obsessed about yellow, and about which wasn't my color before. And also I returned to this idea of like using color as another way how I respond, so not just gesture but also color another way how I respond to photograph. And also I turned to not use sketches, which I did before, and just explore this very spontaneous response which is sometimes difficult in such a big scale, and also like if you work on like the scale, it's often like you don't want to fail it, so it's very sometimes it's hard to put something new because you already have something, you don't want to lose it. And in this work I was like completely wild, and then I also kept it as my main practice. Yeah, that's like also relatively new work I've done. And in this one and like in my more recent practices, I were very observant of this idea that like right, if you like a if when you're painting you have this like bits like shapes and colors, and they have some kind of communication, and you're in the scene a kind of demiurge or something that who kind of arrange that. But this is very sort of dominant position which I don't necessarily want to have. So there are lots of things which happen spontaneous, and I think that like the idea of what I do as a painter is like try to arrange all the voices so they don't overcome each other in kind of democracy, that like everyone is heard, but they are not conflicted. I do sometimes separate projects. Yeah, we'll try to really quick it up, make it, cover it up soon. Sorry for getting a little longer. So I decided to take just two of them, this one of 2022. And that was very specific time for me. It's called When My Babushka Joined the Reich. And it was a time when when the war started, when war with Ukraine, when I sort of lost any sense in art. I was very involved in it. I was very involved in volunteering, and like if you volunteer and then you think, okay, I'm gonna do painting, like who gonna benefit from it, and like I better dedicate my life to that. And that was very, very strange time for me, to be honest. And also I had a huge problem in communication with two of my grandmas, because actually two of my grandmas both had like one fully Ukrainian parent. They both speak Ukrainian. They both like know poems and songs and stuff like that. But sadly, both of them supported Russia, supported Putin. And I really tried to use like this method, like my painting method, as a way to somehow understand how it happened, because it's very hard to connect to someone when you're like basically on the other sides of war, but you still have all these family connections and memories and so on. And so I used for these works, I used different ways to transfer photograph, like not projected. This one was cyanotype. And I kind of kept parts of photograph as it is. So I mean, as they managed to get transfer with the cyanotype, and leaving parts untouched, and like maybe trying to somehow communicate with this like rare reality of that. There were also, in this one I used acrylic transfer. That's like my another grandma with my mom on the beach, and I used acrylic transfer to bring like printed photographs. So like I kind of wanted to make this connection between painting and photograph more like contrasting, like to have photograph more present as it is. This exhibition was organized so that there were those like little writings which he wanted to organize, like they're like cockroaches crawling out from the corners, and there were like phrases from dialogues with my grandmas. Some of them were like from my childhood, maybe, or for now, what like grandma's gonna say when you're gonna get married, you have to eat more kiwis, because I read about it in the newspaper, like all this like kind of funny stuff. And then like don't get COVID from those refugees you work with, like you better do this and that and do this. So like, and like Ukraine should be denazified and all this like horrible stuff mixed with like this everyday things. This work was also there, which is maybe like more like my standard approach of like approaching that's making this connection through color. And this photograph of my grandma again had this legs, which I find kind of funny. It was pretty random photograph, like exactly the scene which probably wasn't supposed to be taken. Maybe someone like pushed someone and like someone took photograph or something. They didn't supposed to take photograph because no one is looking there. And this has this very strong sense of past, because it's not like people posing, it's just like it's random scene of my grandma's. So that was there as well. And then the very last bit I wanna tell is my recent project which I done November last year. I happened to be in a residency in the UK. Actually, I lived in the UK for 7 years, And I have very complex relationships with the UK because, like, on the one hand, I'm very familiar with British culture. I read like lots of books and all that. I was somehow from my childhood really obsessed about lots of British writers. But when I lived there, I actually never felt really nice or welcome or something like that. I think it's not very easy to get culture for me. And so, like, I happened to be in Kingston where my whole journey with Britain started. And I decided to maybe dedicate the exhibition to that. And so I sourced photographs of British life from 60s and 70s, like this one. Yeah, this one I think was from in the 50s. And this scene was kind of very cute. It was like a family somewhere in the fields having tea from those thermoses. And it just was so like peculiar British that like everyone like they're laughing. That just like someone told a joke like 5 minutes ago and everyone just burst out laughing, and they're all drinking tea. And like it just, you look at it like how much, where else people are gonna have so much fun from drinking tea from a thermos. It's kind of fascinating. But I think so. I think this color scheme of this painting and like gestures have some kind of this like jolly vibe in a way, very happy, but also there are some of those gothic bits and this like a little bit distorted faces, and this woman, is she's actually laughing or she's crying. It's kind of, I think, this like complex relationship. So like somehow this complex relationship I have with Britain was a good trigger for me to start the work, because there are really lots of emotions there which can give very strong response. And this one was based on a photograph of like little group of young people having a picnic on a roof. Also sort of super cute. Also like you kind of get involved in this situation and wanna be there. But it's like my whole probably relationship with Britain was that like I could much better build a relationship with Dickens or like someone like that than like with my contemporary classmates in Royal College. And so for me, this situation is like I really want to be there because it looks like a fun scene, and I cannot be there first of all because it's from 60s and it's like a long time ago, but also because I felt this like inapproachability during living in Britain. And this is the last work I'm showing, almost done. So yeah, again, that's also from the same series, and it also was like kind of picnic. There were lots of pictures of picnics I found, which were kind of nice. They were like those three boys, and for some reason I associated the middle one with Oscar Wilde. He had a very kind of cheeky face expression, and somehow I thought of this like, so they had this tent where some boys were sitting and some boys were sort of another one boy was sort of out, and that it felt like he's not really welcome in this scene, or he's trying. So like it's kind of, it looks like a very innocent scene first, but it's actually not as innocent because there are like some complex social dynamic which is not necessarily peaceful. Yeah, so that was the project I did in November in London. Since then I'm here, so now I'm living in Leipzig, and I hope I'm gonna do a residency in Lea this May, hopefully May to July. And yeah, this is my cat Pixie, which I thought to add for your particular face expression. So that's pretty much it. Sorry for making it a little longer.
Thank you. Any questions or feedback for Katya?
So this question of like the past, I couldn't. Are you seeing this as like an ethical obligation, field of play? Because it sometimes seem to shift between registers of feeling empowered by your engagement with the past, feeling like you're obliged to the past, playing with the past as material.
I think it's both in some way. I don't know. I don't think I feel particularly obliged. I just feel there is this kind of strange connection which I explore. So I think it's just more like of a research in a way. I think that like I'm not even researching past. I'm researching like what makes me relate to it in this way. Something like that.
Yeah, I have
maybe in a similar field. Because I think in the beginning one of your points said that you're somehow like opposing history or something like that. And that surprised me in a way. I would be interested to hear more about it, because to me it felt like there's this sort of official history, but then there's this sort of personal or private or family history, which is just a different strategy of thinking about the past, and a different strategy of information. Yeah, passing over information to like the next generation, like very different ways. But with opposing, I feel like it sounds like you really want to challenge. It's not that much, it's two different ways, but you really want to challenge the one way, and I would be interested to hear more about that.
I think in some way they were like, because in a way this practice I've been doing for already like 7 years or something, 8, so no 6, and somehow they were different sides of it in a different time. At some point this idea of opposing actually was a huge thing, and especially opposing official history through like social history, through history of particular people. And at the same time I think it was, I mean, the idea of propaganda and like how propaganda changed past. Like I think when especially with the war, like with the war in Ukraine and stuff like that, it became very clear that propaganda can really, like propaganda on the past and like the seditions in the past can provoke really grave results. And that somehow I think I started feeling it was very hard to return to my practice or return to art in general, but like I think the way how I did it was through this idea that like what gives energy to my work as well is this like opposition towards past created by propaganda and past like which is like added. And somehow like when like propaganda is gonna change the past, they're gonna do it for particular purpose, and when I'm intruding the past with my like colorful gestures, I'm doing it sort of like in a fun way, which is like can be problematic in some way, but I think it's like I see it as opposing this like specific use of history towards this like playful approach. Oops. Sorry. Yeah, but it's quite a complex question, because I think I would reply to that differently, like 2 years ago and 4 years ago and so on.
That's good.
Thank you.
Because you have like for example, both painting on canvas and painting on paper of like the surgery photograph. I was wondering like if you have the feeling of like when you return to the same photograph multiple times, do you feel like the shifting between the process in each one?
I think like it's just like you come with a different mood or something like that, and but I think like when I work on the same photograph several times, there are some things which stay the same, like maybe how I approach a space or something like that. It is like I did like three paintings with exactly the same photographs, and then I didn't show, but I had also drawings and stuff, and like somehow I think the general mood somehow stayed, something like that. Yeah.
Is there any type of feedback that you wish for?
From a viewer? Well, I ideally would like to keep freedom for a viewer, so like not particularly wish something, and like when I work. No, not particularly. I don't know. It's like I think I'm curious. No, I think like maybe not particularly wasn't right question. Sorry, wasn't right answer. I think I'm maybe curious to what extent people can see there is a photograph behind and there is a struggle with the photograph, because like sometimes people told me it's very clear from the composition, and sometimes that it's not, and like they never thought it's a photograph. So like I think that's like what I try to ask, and then I think I'm curious what kind of mood it passes, something like that, if that was a question. because I wasn't sure if it's like what feedback I wish to hear, or what feedback I gonna ask for.
Well, I'm guessing also like what kind of feedback would help you from a feedback round. I ask this question a lot in feedback rounds because I just think it's also something we give to you as an artist.
Well, if it's like something to ask, I think I would maybe ask what kind of feeling it transposes, and does it transpose anything?
You said you started with your family pictures and then you moved to another pictures. Did it change like your approach or your feeling of belonging that you had maybe, or how you feel about the pictures of people you don't know? After the painting, they become your friends or I don't know.
I think I definitely built some kind of relationship with them, especially like, this girl who've been like showing up in different photographs. I definitely have some kind of, but I think like, well, when you work with like a photograph of your family, you have you don't need to look for particular emotional connection to that, because it's obvious, because it's like maybe you have kind of emotional bonds with the people there, or like maybe problems or conflicts or something like that. So I think in this way, family photograph give more easier response. While when I work with found photographs, I normally, it's not like I construct stories, but I think I try to construct some kind of relationship, or it might be something which for some reason provokes a reply, like a response. So I think it's a little bit different. And also I think in a way I can't help but care more for like my family members, so like become less caricaturical, or like make less fun of like their faces or something. Maybe something like that.
You asked like if we see that it's based on photographs and so. I think there's these one of the qualities of photos is that it's like this still in time, so even if people are moving, they are of course there's also long time I'm lacking some words there, like photographs where you see that someone was moving and it's unsharp gestures and so on, but I think that's something which you can recognize in the paintings. That's like a frozen picture in the way the people are posing towards each other, and the view through the lens is kind of clear. That, the general layout of a photograph is there most of the time.
Thank you.
I was interested, could you talk more about how you find your color palettes? You talked a bit in the beginnings from taking it from, I don't know, like inner organs and so on from surgery, but in between I was thinking, how did you get to those palettes?
Yeah, definitely not with bright yellow ones, right? Like with organs. Well, I think that to some extent it's kind of how I can emotionally respond through color. I think like color somehow became more important for me further I go, because I think firstly I was far more into gesture than a color. And I think it's a moment that just like when I look on a picture, somehow I can say that about this picture, like rather feel like this type of color or that type of color, and I just like try to listen to these intuitions and so on. But in a way it's, I wouldn't say it's random, because it's like, but it's intuitive.
Is it where you also connected to the context from which the photos come, like certain cultural space?
Really.
Because
I think it might influence unconsciously somehow, but I don't do it. I don't do it specifically. I don't deliberately.
I am question regarding the sizing of your work, because she always worked for photographs. Photographs are normally quite small, especially if you have the very old ones, and you often work really big. And I just wonder what connection you find in these two contrasting sizes.
Well, I think I like the scale for having this feeling of a portal, which you enter and just like in a photograph. Like I did some works directly on the photographs as well, and like or on like a smaller format, but it doesn't. It also can be interesting, but it doesn't give this like wide gesture, and because it doesn't give wide gesture, it's sort of this intrusion. If you think of that intrusion in a photograph, or like bring in your presence, like having this performative, like almost dance kind of relationship, is not as possible. So actually my favorite format would be like something 180 to 220, because that gives like, you know, you can spread your both hands and you wouldn't reach their sides, so you can walk around, and it's more like, I think it gives more of this experience of a portal in a way, which I really like. Otherwise, I think like for me the most difficult format is medium, like the window. So like when it's like a little one, like a page, then it's, I don't know, there is something like that you kind of play with that, and it's sort of like bringing you in it, and you need to somehow scale yourself to get in there. And when it's super big, it's also like you have open gestures, and when it's like sort of window format, I don't know, like 100 to 70, that's the most difficult for me actually, because it's like not here, not there. But I think I started doing more of those as well recently.
Just to elaborate on that, because you were saying that you feel that the photograph is dead and that you try to bring it alive when you work, and I was just thinking, at least my first connection was that when you make them in this size, you basically give them a life size format, so that you're almost trying to reproduce the person.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I really like it. Yeah, I guess to some extent, and like I also somehow feel far more comfortable when humans in a painting are life size. Maybe that's a reason actually. Never thought of it.
Any more questions? Or
Yeah, I have a
yes.
question. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thanks a lot.
I have a question connected to your art processes, because every artist has their own processes and their own ways. So I would like to ask you, how do you find that your paintings or your works are finished?
Oh, that's the worst part.
Yeah, because this is very different from artist to artist, but it's interesting because it's connected really to your particular things. So when is it that you find it?
I think
your
somehow
piece is ready.
it clicks when it's ready, but before that there are always, so like my normal process looks like, so I started like, so a project photograph, I start painting, I'm super happy with everything, I think that's my best work ever, then like I think but it lacks something, I start adding something it lacks, then I decide, hey, it's completely ruined, it's horrible, I had my best work and now I ruined it, then like depression for like a week, and then like this like, so I think this coming to this despair where you think that it's ruined is very important, because then you start doing something fresh. Because otherwise, if you're like too in love with your like works, you wouldn't do something really decisive. And then it's like, oh fuck that, it's ruined anyway. Then like you get that, and then like after this, sometimes I just feel, oh now it's finished. And I like, I used to quote, there is like, I really like the book of Roland Barthes about Fragments of Lovers' Discourse, and there was this idea that like, desire recognize itself. So like I recognize a desire about which I didn't know anything before, or something like that, like when they speak about falling in love or something. And I really like this thing that like you didn't know about what should be there, but you recognize when it's there. So I think this is like how it clicks, when it clicks, but it's sometimes it's also questionable if it clicks or not. It's like I'm not 100% sure.
Will you return then later, or then?
It happened a couple of times, like this, like why the painting Resurgence, it was in storage for a year and a half. And then because it wasn't this like I ruined that stage, and then I didn't know what to do with that, and then after a year I was like, oh, why don't I do that? And like, oh, perfect, it's finished. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Katya, for all the information and all the insights in your work. Let's give one more applause for Katya. Thank you for coming tonight again. And of course, Katya is going to stay around as well. If you want to ask some more questions, feel free to stay, have a drink.